Hi, this is Charlie. This is the podcast to Hell and Back. It's January 25th, very snowy day here in America and just in Massachusetts where I live. I've been home all day digesting the recent information about the second killing of a perfectly innocent person in Minneapolis by federal agents, um, along with the misrepresentation by the government of what actually happened, leading essentially to victim blaming rather than to seeing the actual circumstances where force was uh, completely inappropriately and brutally applied. I want to share a perspective on what's going on. Uh, Let me start with the perspective is going to be through the lens of dialectical thinking. And as the vast majority of anybody listening to this already knows, um, here's what's involved with dialectical thinking or a dialectical point of view. It's that reality consists pretty much constantly and everywhere of forces opposing other forces. Things always on the move, collisions happening, conflict happening, opposition occurring. The structure of reality, if you could envision it this way, you would just see an enormous number of opposing positions, of opposing forces, opposing events, and that's just normal. And a dialectical um, process toward the next step in reality will find the valid ingredient or ingredients or elements of each of the two opposing positions or forces, and will find a kind of creative synthesis of the two so that there is a transaction between them. Something new comes of it that honors something about each original position. And then you have a new position, and it elicits opposition. It goes on and on and on. So I've been thinking about in the United States the dialectic, two dialectics that have put Donald Trump in the center of the story, making him appear to be the center of the story, when in fact I think it's these dialectics, these forces that are more the center of the story. And so, number one, and I won't say much about this one, it's a long something people are aware of in the United States, but it's the dialectic between racism and basically non-racism. Racism as seeing people of color or people of a certain ethnic background as inferior and as bad in one way or another, or incapable in one way or another, and seeing people who don't have those characteristics, people in our country who are white, and in particular white and Christian, as being, quote, normal or most capable. So there's this dialectic between the racist point of view and the non-racist point of view. The racist point of view not leaning towards equality between people of different races. Um, the non-racist point of view, at least within the democratic mm, realm of our country, would see people as equal, the way things are stated. in our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. Um, why does Donald Trump come into that? Because he is a white, supposedly Christian guy with Northern European background who uh, has distinguished himself from his early years in real estate in New York as racist, as treating, first of all, trying to make sure that his buildings did not have people of color, and when they did, that those people were treated in a more inferior way. And then certain episodes coming up, such as the Central Park Five, when he tried to advertise in the New York Times that the Central Park Five should be put to death, these five black guys who were wrongly accused of raping a white woman in Central Park. And he distinguished himself as a racist at that point. Um, what's the other dialectic? This would be a broad uh, opposition between two different uh, ways of thinking, ideologies about the United States that were there from its inception, have traveled for all of these 250 years, and are taking a different shape today, but still with the same collision. And that is the collision between the preference for tyranny and the preference for democracy. Um, we can start with tyranny. That's the preference for a system in which uh, power resides in one person or a few people who feel themselves to be superior to everyone else, who deserve more power and wealth than everyone else, who deserve more recognition and awards and honors than everyone else. Uh, and that rule in a way that's uh, emphasizes strength and power uh, over everyone else, uh, and often done in a way that's harsh, sometimes brutal, uh, and sometimes sadistic. Um, there have been lots of examples of tyranny in the last 1 or 2 centuries. Um, and the United States always has a strain within it of those who would prefer the strongman approach, the dictator approach, the tyranny approach to how you move forward as a country. That hasn't been the predominant public byline of the United States. That's been more democracy, but it's been there and it rises and falls at different moments in time. Um, democracy. Um, democracy where people, where power reflects the will of the governed, where everyone is seen as equal. Uh, everyone is agrees upon a series of laws and they are equal before the law. Uh, it incorporates a diverse group of people. It's inclusive. Uh, there's a morality to it, where with an emphasis and evaluation on cooperation, on decency, like I said, on equality, on helping out those who are marginalized or underrepresented or disabled. Um, and it was written into the Constitution. It was written into the Declaration of Independence that we are a country of and by and for the people. Uh, that everybody's treated equally in the effort to pursue life, liberty, and happiness under the same laws. Uh, and that's been the uh, special thing about the experiment of the United States of America, which formed itself through the founders as an alternative to the system in England, where King George III was the king and was tyrannical. And so the United States, in a way, was formed as an alternative to tyranny, but maintained a tyrannical strain within it that has, like I said, risen and fallen. And these two dialectics going on in the United States over all this time, certainly obviously during the time of slavery, but it's continued in different forms. Uh, it combines these two so that there's a kind of sometimes those who are in favor of tyranny are also those in favor of racism. They're in favor of the accumulation of more wealth and resources and power at the top among white people, and and a willingness to dismiss or ignore or punish or trash and suppress people of color and people at the margins. And in fact, to see people of color and people at the margins and people who are immigrants or migrants as the cause of all of our problems. And therefore, the solution would be to victimize them, to get rid of them, to send them to another country, to detain them, to remove their power. Um, and so that's the backdrop as we come into the last 15 years, and Donald Trump sees Barack Obama being the president and a black family living in the White House, and begins his presidential campaign, you might say, by challenging uh, that Obama was not an American, that he was not born in America, that he has a strange name, that he wasn't Christian, that he's certainly not white, um, and was willing to baldly lie about Obama's birth certificate, and stuck to that even when it was obvious that it was something he made up in order to demean and disqualify uh, a black man. Uh, Trump, during the earlier years too, as he was running for president, people got to know him little by little, and he was seen as somebody who had been successful, even though in fact he had had to declare bankruptcy several times. Uh, Felt that he was a self-made man, a multi-millionaire or billionaire, even though it then became clear through certain reporting that he his father gave him a huge amount of money to begin with and was also in the real estate business and helped him get going. Um, he had a style of swagger, of being uh, a womanizer, uh, a playboy, a guy who was wealthy or acted wealthy, liked to have his name on things, uh, made himself prominent, and then threatened for some time to run for president, and then did run for president. And in running for president, made the announcement by coming down an escalator at his tower, Trump Tower in New York City, as if he was a would-be king arriving into the candidacy. Um, and he, by the way that he would act as if he was more bigger than the government, as if he knew better, and as if he was willing to trash many things about the government that other people revered, um, gave him a certain kind of credibility among people in America who, from about 1980 going forward, were part of the disenfranchised, the people, the white guys left behind by the economy as the economy became stacked heavily in favor of of the wealthy, the white, the rich, the uh, and uh, as had begun during Ronald Reagan's presidency in the 1980s. And ever since then, there's been this increasingly disenfranchised large percent of the United States, maybe 70% or more, that um, became more and more uh, the group of people, the class of people who had lost uh, real value in financially, while the people at the top 1%, became richer and richer and richer, and the inequality grew bigger and bigger and bigger. So that led to a level of frustration, disappointment, and resentment in throughout the United States, among the white working class and the white non-working. And for so at that moment in the teens, the 2000 teens, Trump presented himself as their champion, as a person who, because he was financially successful, could bring them financial success, who could identify that the government was not serving them well, and he could sort of validate them by his positions that he took, claiming that he was going to reduce their taxes and that they were being ripped off. And one of the central tenets of his candidacy from early on was to uh, attack immigrants, um, people from Mexico and South America, Africa, and what he called shithole countries. Um, And so that was a big strain, and that gave people hope that he had landed on the explanation for why they were more poor, why their lives weren't going as well, was because of these outsiders invading the country, and that them being brutal, bad people, um, that were taking up resources. And so he really was, in a way, Donald Trump was a synthesis himself, of uh, a white guy with a racist position, positioning himself in that dialectic there, and in the dialectic of democracy versus tyranny, seemed to be would be willing to be a strong man and sort of clean house and fix things for everybody. And it was and if as if democracy had been the problem um, that led people to be more unhappy. So this all sort of came together, most of it before Donald Trump became part of the scene. But once he did, he landed in a certain place, and there were populations that were ready to endorse him once he made himself more and more clear. Once he saw what they were valuing in him, it reinforced him for becoming increasingly kind of a guy who would believe in shaking things up, breaking things down, taking things apart, and attacking people that democracy had valued up to the and then he had his first term as a president during which he tried to do these things and be tyrannical, etc., and be lying in the service of that. Um, but he also, that being his first time around, he, from his point of view, made the mistake of appointing various cabinet members in important posts who were more traditional, though they were Republicans, they were more traditional, moderate Republicans who had been esteemed and value in what they had done before, but they had more positions that were closer to democracy. And they put restraints on him. They checked him. They raised questions about him. And that was frustrating for him. And when he got out of office, when he lost the election, of course, didn't ever acknowledge that he actually lost. But when he lost the election in 2020, he then spent the next 4 years, as I've learned recently, nearly every day having conversations with Stephen Miller, who then became a sort of a deputy assistant at the White House and really in a way the driving force of the anti-immigrant policies, and even now, up to now, the policies that lead us to send federal agents and ICE agents into various democratic cities and brutally attacking people and generating battles there. Um, and then Trump endorses that too, and Stephen Miller architects that and endorses that. And there's a kind of a mutual reinforcement between these two people. Um, so Trump became that he sort of came into this wave of being the tyrannically oriented person, the racism oriented person, the businessman who might be able to help other people get out of poverty and get out of trouble financially, and the kind of person who's willing to shake things up. And so looking back on it, it just looks like, well, of course Donald Trump got elected. And then he got elected again, which is amazing. But I think it's because the same kind of strain continued to exist, and then people saw, even though on paper, numerically, Joe Biden did a fabulous job of rebuilding the economy after the pandemic was so destroying the economy, so that we were like the envy of the rest of the world, and inflation was starting to come down, and people were starting to get higher wages relatively. That Trump just came into back into office with people who were frustrated that things weren't moving faster, and and so he was able to mount this challenge, and then have the disaster for the Democrats happen, that Joe Biden, while he claimed that he would be a transitional president and just do one term, decided to do a second term when he was actually in the process of becoming demented. And his cognitive decline was argued about and then eventually became obvious. And then there was Kamala Harris trying to run for president in the final 107 days of the campaign and having trouble really getting the level of momentum going that she needed. And also, she had been tied to any negative feelings people had about Biden. So got in again, and he got in all ready to go with the help of Stephen Miller and Russell Vought and other people who were ready to dismantle the government, basically take it apart, take it down. And then also with the help of the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, who could see his own fortunes going up if only he was taking a prominent role in helping Trump and at the White House. So a lot of things happened that look now like, of course, they happened that way, and of course that worked that way. And now where are we? Now where we are is that Donald Trump has uh, ascended to his first, he's done his first year, and he's just on almost a daily basis tried to dismantle things and attack things and change the position of the United States in the world and make it clear that he's tyrannical. Let me take a little detour from this and come back to it, but the detour from this to say a little about Donald Trump as a person, um, and that sort of makes it fit with what the times called for or was willing to support, or the dialectical situation in which he arose and ascended to power. What about this man? I'm not going to say anything here that hasn't been said already several times, but I've sort of been putting it together in my own mind, really thinking, what do I really think about him? And I don't know him personally, and of course, I'm not supposed to diagnose him because I haven't met him. That's sort of a standard rule called the Goldwater rule. But he is such a prominent figure who has been displayed himself and so openly in so many ways that one can say, well, let me say at least about the public figure as I know him. And so say, take this with a grain of salt if you think, well, this doesn't really represent him. It's not the real him. But here's what he looks like to me. First of all, there's really four things I want to say. First, his temperament. I think he has a hypomanic temperament. He's a high energy, always on the move. His mind is always going. He has what might be called clinically flight of ideas. When you see him doing speeches and he ends up calling it doing the weave, he's just kind of doing what someone with a bipolar illness who has hypomania does, jumping from topic to topic with a lot of energy and with some humor and some charged with aggression and irritability sometimes, and highly reactive and punitive towards people when he's pissed off, free with his anger, free with his aggression, and free with his and impulsive with his sexuality. That all of those things, even as a young man, and I think even to now, given that it would look different in a 79-year-old than in a 50-year-old. He continues, I think, to have this kind of hypomanic temperament. He claims that he gets 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night. I have no idea whether that's true or not. But he claims it as if that's a good thing, whereas in fact, um, it's probably not a good thing if that's true. It probably makes him a little bit less sharp and more restless and more antsy, and maybe aging sooner than he would need to. Um, so his temperament's there. And that temperament already explains some things. I think that it's not surprising with somebody who's hypomanic that they're irritable, that they're angry, that they're aggressive, that they're mean sometimes. They can be harsh, they can be impulsive, their judgment can be poor. They also can be quite funny. They can be quite spontaneous, and their mind is jumping around all the time. So that's one thing. That's not the same as somebody's personality development. That's really kind of like the biological given. Then comes his personality. And I would say he meets pretty much all the criteria for a personality disorder in some ways, even though I only know him as a public figure, and therefore one has to take this with a grain of salt. he meets all the criteria. He's like absolutely fits the picture of a narcissistic personality disorder. So what's that appear as? That's a real it's really there's kind of a dual focus in somebody with a narcissistic personality disorder. On the one hand, they usually are inside and sometimes quietly and sometimes not admittedly hypersensitive, having thin skin, having trouble with criticism. Uh, we certainly know that Donald Trump he feels easily insulted, always has to hit back if somebody kids about him, makes him the butt of a joke, late night comedy or anywhere. Um, and like I said, has very thin skin and has to respond to anybody who challenges him with a sort of a double whammy back, like double the strength of whoever attacked him or whoever criticized him or whoever raised a question about him. So, or made a joke about him, all of these things. So there is a kind of like a hypersensitivity that's typical of narcissistic personality disorder. And then the other thing that's typical, and there's more or less of it depending on the person, is the grandiosity. So the grandiosity, which in some ways is like a defense against the thin skinnedness of the person. And so he's grandiose. What's that mean? He thinks of himself as extremely important. He has an exaggerated sense of how important he is, though that's confusing when somebody's actually politically the maybe the most important person in the world. But he has an exaggerated sense of his own intelligence, his own attractiveness, his own sexual appeal, his own uh, capacity to redesign the interior decorating of the White House and things like that. And knowing better than any other leader in the world about things, and knowing better than any general in our military about how to run a military operation. There's a clearly an exaggerated, highly distorted, something short of psychotic, but really overvalued thinking about himself. And then along with that, a tendency to be vindictive toward people who don't see him that way, uh, angry with people who don't give him the credit he thinks he deserves, such as the recent sort of campaign he was on for the past year to get the Nobel Peace Prize, and then furious that he didn't get it, and then blaming people for that and blaming the country of Norway for that and things like that. Crazy stuff. Um, and so he was the grandiosity is really apparent, embarrassingly. So one would think, though it doesn't seem to embarrass him. Usually, the person with a narcissistic personality disorder is a little bit hard to embarrass because they kind of have they shame everybody else other than themselves. Um, so that's also in his case, he has a kind of a severe, you might say, syndrome, subsyndrome within narcissistic personality disorder that people, and this has been talked about some in social media and some reporting. Some people have called him, said he has malignant narcissism. And that's not a formal category in a diagnostic manual, but it is a sort of a recognized um, subcategory of narcissistic personality disorder with all the narcissistic features that I've mentioned, and then some additional qualities. Those additional qualities are a tendency towards lying, dishonesty, antisocial behavior, cheating, that's one thing. It's just sort of like a disregard for the truth, a willingness to throw the truth overboard at any moment if in the service of making oneself more powerful, seem more powerful, more important, more recognized, whatever. So there's been a long history that's been documented repeatedly of him lying, and even right up to these days continues regularly as if there's no such thing as a recognition of the truth. So the lying is an additional, an antisocial quality. And secondly, a harshness that's really more harsh than the average antisocial or narcissistic personality disorder, including elements of sadism, where there's actually almost pleasure taken in hurting other people or embarrassing other people. Those traits are obvious in him, that he takes great pleasure in coming up with silly devaluing names of anybody that's challenging him, and sending out things constantly through his social media that attack other people in a way that's very painful for people, or could be if they didn't understand him to be such a distorted human being. But he's so there is this kind of uh, um, sadism. Uh, there's vindictiveness takes center stage, as if that's like one of the main motivations of life, is to get back at people who have gotten at you. And of course, a significant part of his energy in this this past year, now that he's president for this term, has been directed at those people who he thinks wronged him before. um, so there's just so many qualities that there is and this harshness and this sort of problem within narcissism also would include that there's really no allegiance to loyalty to structures or agreements or standards or people outside oneself. Um, People are properties to him. Countries are properties to him. Territory is properties to him. And everything's a transaction. And everything reflects whether somebody actually is being fair to him, whether somebody's honoring him to the degree that they appropriately should. So all of that goes on. So if you and then there's one more feature about him. I said there'd be four features. One is his temperament. The second is the narcissistic personality disorder. The third is the malignant narcissism within that. And the fourth is what appears to be his gradual but discernible degree of a pace of cognitive decline, that he's going downhill. His speeches are more disjointed and rambling. His forgetfulness is more obvious. His falling asleep in the middle of important meetings right next to other people, and then lying about it is very obvious. He's got some kind of health conditions that included having had an MRI that's been kind of like shadowy in what it really was that's gone on. He's emphasized that he's three times taken a Montreal Cognitive Assessment, a MOCA, which is, and then he's claimed that he aced it three times. I mean, this is a fairly simple test for somebody who's not demented. But he's making it sound like he's just got into like some elite school or something like that. So it's all that it's just, I think that what happens when you have cognitive decline like this, and probably is a sort of a mild stage of a dementia is going to overtake him over these coming years, if not sooner, that you start to see an exaggeration of some of the troubling personality traits. So I think it may be becoming worse, and his recent performances on the world stage in Europe, where he really made a thorough embarrassment of our country himself by the way he treated European leaders and allies, and the way he's been claiming that he wants to own Greenland and take it over, and Denmark shouldn't have it. All of these kinds of things, and there have been many of them, um, make it clear that he's kind of losing it. We don't know exactly how and why, and everything's being kept rather secret, I think, when it comes to his health conditions. But that's going on too. So where does that factor in to his becoming a synthesis or entering into the dialectic of the tyrannical despot leader versus the leader of a democratic society. Obviously, he chooses the tyranny side and with give lip service to the democracy side. It means he's not very morally intact. Um, and and he creates a kind of a paranoid us versus them atmosphere uh, himself that sort of feeds into what many of the people who elected him also think themselves in their own lives in the world because they feel they've been left behind. And then the racism comes into this right from the very, practically the first day that he first became president when he started to have a ban on people coming from certain Muslim countries. And now it's all kinds of other countries that he's, and at the moment, he's just on a rampage about Somalia and how Somalia has devastated Minnesota and everybody should be deported, people of color Somalians in Minnesota. So um, it means that he's taking a certain position within these wide dialectical um, opposing forces in the United States. And what are the implications for what that means that those of us who are appalled by this, are horrified by this, are depressed by this? What should we do about it? I think that I don't know specifically. I think for everybody, depending on who you are, what you do in society, and what your motivations are, there are different things to do. It isn't like there's a formula. But I think within that formula, if is that to recognize that he is carving out a very decisive position in favor of tyranny and racism, and deadly force and attacks on his enemies probably trying to set the stage to disrupt the elections in November, where the Congress could change hands to Democratic hands, which he clearly doesn't want to face, of course. Um, and so I think the thing to be doing when you think about dialectics is that this thesis now, he's the thesis, he's the proposition that's going on now. He's the force that's moving forward. So that needs to be opposed, and it needs to be opposed in as much as possible equal force opposing. So it's not looks like a weak force. It's sort of like he needs to be stood up to, repeatedly called out like the emperor's new clothes, that he has no clothes on, or that he has no honor, or he has no dignity, he has no respect, that he's kind of a fool who's been elevated to a position way beyond where he should be, and he's making a mess of things, and that people should call him out. People should not treat him as normal. That's maddening to watch, given what he's like, to see people sit quietly when he's giving a speech that's outrageous and ridiculous, including sitting the European leaders sitting in a recent economic summit in Europe and just listening to him without standing up and opposing him there, and then trying to stay within normal frames, and then making comments about him, but also making deals with him, and also flattering him, and also wanting to elect him to suggest him for the Nobel Prize, and this kind of thing where people are mistakenly, I think, when it comes to what his impact is going to be on history, people are treating him as if he's okay, as if he's normal. And I think he's extremely not okay. So one needs to call him out on that, and one needs to act like that. One needs to not go along with him. And proposals that are coming up in the government that he's in favor of that would just continue to perpetuate a tyrannical agenda or a racist agenda should just be roundly opposed. And so if there's a force that meets his force, a force that's equal and opposite to his force, then it creates the possibility of people waking up in the middle and seeing things differently and taking a position that's some either against him or somewhere between him and the opposing position. But if one doesn't stand up, and if he's able to control the narrative and define what's going on, like for his attempt to silence universities where there's free thought going on, or to silence and penalize law firms that are operating normally, and other agencies and things like USAID that was actually saving the lives of millions of children around the world. I mean, and it's public radio and public television, all of these things that he's against are sort of bastions of free thinking and debate and discussion and trying to be accurate about things. He really doesn't live well in that kind of atmosphere. So he's trying to get rid of those things. So that has to be opposed, opposed, opposed as much as possible. So on that, I would just say it's helping me to acquire and think through the perspective that I've been sharing with you today. It's helping me to sort of fortify myself and be thinking, okay, where can I take these positions? Where am I acting as if he's normal when he's not? And if there are protests, people should show up. And very importantly, as it keeps being said, to not be violent in these situations unless sort of overwhelmingly provoked, which does happen because to protest nonviolently and make your voice heard nonviolently, but in force with lots of people and with definitiveness, I think is a morally defensible position. And if you break down into violence versus violence, it makes it really hard to take to sort of specify that you're coming from this other side of the dialectic. So I hope this was clear enough. And I hope that you're all hanging in there and finding your own positions about this. Probably, if you're listening to me, you probably agree with a good percentage of what I'm saying in one way or another, though you might be able to say it with more articulation. And if you disagree with me, of course, you disagree with me. You see things differently or on a different place within the same dialectics. Okay, good to talk to you all. If you're in the same snowstorm that I'm in America today, I hope you're going to be digging out soon. Hope you'll be safe. Okay, take care. Bye bye.